Hello and welcome to the Tech and Sports Podcast. Tech and Sports is a show about how technology is revolutionizing all of the major sports as well as health and fitness. You can find it on your podcast service of choice. My name is Alex Radu and I'm here with the one and only Mandy Kovacs.
Hello.
This week we spoke to Dr. Cameron Marshall from the Complete Concussion Management Network. Plus, as always, all the biggest news from the last week, new apps or wearables, and your weekly concussion update. But before we get to that, we would really appreciate it if you would review and rate the Tech and Sports Podcast on iTunes and Google Play, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. It really does help us grow the show, and we really, really appreciate all of the support so far. And with that, sit back and relax, because the Tech and Sports crew is entering the game. All right, Mandy, the news.
All right, so first up is news that after a 4-year hiatus, Steph Curry is officially back on YouTube. So the Golden State Warriors superstar is relaunching his channel, Official Steph Curry 30, and plans to host an original series called 5 Minutes from Home that starts on May 1st. So the video series will have 5 initial episodes and will focus on Curry chatting with random guests like Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf and rapper Nipsey Hussle as he heads home from games. The show is produced by Curry's recently formed production company, Unanimous Media, and they're actually working on a second show with him in which he'll offer his take on Silicon Valley. So that's expected to be shot this summer, so stay tuned for that.
I think it's obvious that Steph Curry is now taking advantage of his huge contract he just signed.
Oh, yeah.
And then second, it's cool to see the effect that Durant's YouTube channel had on his fellow Warriors.
It's spreading.
Durant did something really good, and this is honestly a good idea. It shows like these these basketball players in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, Oakland, they're really investing in tech, and to see what Curry's going to have to say about that, especially now that he has money and he's investing himself.
Yeah, he has that access, right?
It's going to be super interesting to see what he actually says, and I'm actually really curious.
Isn't he also hurt right now? I feel like he's using his time off to branch out.
Although he could potentially play in round 2.
All right.
So, yeah.
Oh, there we go. That's exciting. Okay, and then in similar news, the Vegas Golden Knights have launched their official Twitch channel called VGK Twitch. The popular online video platform lets users start their own public live stream or tune into someone else's and post some comments. So the team says that this is the perfect way to have fun and engage with fans in different ways. And the first show on the Knights Twitch account is a program called Shane's House that's hosted by the team's color commentator and former NHLer Shane Needy. He'll get a chance to chat with a number of different guests like players, celebrities, team management, and different Golden Knights fans as they come by to play video games at his studio. So people watching the game will be able to chat directly with Needy and his guests, and more programs will be coming soon.
So I will say this. I do hate the Vegas Golden Knights, but
it's a lot of petty hate.
It's the pettiest and pettiest of hate. And I'm not afraid to admit that. But I do got to give them props for, looking at what other leagues and other teams are doing and being like, hey, hockey's so far behind on everyone else.
Right.
So we will try something that everyone else is having success with.
I feel like they're the only ones that are trying to keep up with like the NBA or some of the other fun leagues that do these types of things.
And the only reason they're doing that is because they are literally not even a year old.
Yes, they are really new. They're kind of like us millennials.
They are the startup of the NHL.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
We'll have to remember that.
I'm going to coin that.
Yeah, so no one steal that. Okay, next, we reported last week that the NFL and the NFL Players Association banned the use of 10 helmets after they failed impact tests, and now we have news of which helmet actually did the best. So apparently the Seattle startup Visus makes the safest helmet in football after ranking number 1 in the NFL's helmet laboratory testing performance results. So the league assessed 34 helmet models made by 6 different companies, and Visus's 2018 01 helmet came in first, while their 2017 version came in second. So the full list of the NFL's best helmets is available online if any of you wants to check it out. And it's actually really interesting because some of the most common or popular helmet brands that I've seen, like Rawlings, for example, they did really badly and were in the bottom 10. So Yeah, check it out if you care.
What I find really interesting about this is I didn't know that there were 34 different helmet models used in pro leagues.
Yeah, apparently.
I didn't have any idea that there was that many.
Did you think it was like standardized?
Yeah, I thought it would be more, I thought it would be more standardized.
Yeah.
I mean, like, granted, like whenever you play like I guess like games like NHL and Madden, like you can customize your helmet and there's always a ton of options, but I always thought like in real life it was just more standardized. But it's interesting, and it's honestly not that surprising at all that the common and popular brands some of them are not doing too well,
right?
Because they're probably the most manufactured, and they're probably like, oh, this is like the most widely popular, we're just going to continue doing what we're doing.
Yeah, they're probably comfortable with what they've always been doing, right?
Yeah,
so that doesn't cut it anymore, clearly.
For sure.
Okay, and then continuing with the NFL, it's also renewed its streaming deal with Amazon for Thursday night games in a package worth around $130 million over the next 2 seasons. So Amazon won these streaming rights in 2017 over Twitter and Facebook, and now that it's revealed it has over 100 million Amazon Prime subscribers, this extension was a no-brainer for the NFL, according to its Chief Media and Business Officer, Brian Rolap. So you do have to be an Amazon Prime member to take advantage of this, however, and Amazon is jacking up the prices from $99 to $119 in June, but that is still way cheaper than a cable subscription, so maybe consider it. There are a couple caveats, though. Amazon won't be streaming the Thanksgiving football games because that wasn't part of the deal, apparently. And it's also only streaming games that are also on Fox. So that means it won't actually start broadcasting until week 4 at the end of September.
I mean, like, we talk about this all the time. This is good for, I mean, all these companies are Amazon, Twitter, Facebook. I mean, they're all bidding for it. They're all going to try to do it. Twitter failed when they had the opportunity.
They really did.
But I also just don't think Twitter's the greatest avenue to watch a full football game.
Yeah.
Or a full sporting event in general. I think it's better for more bite-sized content. But Amazon seems like a no-brainer for this, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is pretty successful, especially because most people don't buy Prime for this. They're buying Prime for the
faster
free shipping.
Right.
For or Prime Video or many of the other reasons why you would get Prime, that streaming is probably not in the top 5.
Yeah, again, so this is like an added bonus for people, I guess, but maybe an incentive for others too, for right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to move on to something really interesting. We've talked about how some stadiums or arenas, like Madison Square Garden, have been using facial recognition for security purposes. But apparently many are also using the technology to learn more about their fans for targeted marketing campaigns. So the South Africa-based FanCam works with sports teams and stadiums to snap photos of fans watching the games live, and the data is used for targeted ads, music, and entertainment, according to a CNBC report. So this has become a really big business for a lot of companies who advertise in sporting venues, and the company's products have been used by the Cavs, the Patriots, the Atlanta Braves, and the New York Rangers. So FanCam says that its tech snaps high-resolution pictures of fans multiple times per game, and that demographic data is used to improve the fan experience, as well as improve sponsorship retention, beef up security, and even decide what music gets played. So for example, we often criticize baseball for having an old fan base that averages around 50 years old, but FanCam says that the average age of people that attend games live is actually 10 years younger than that, and it can prove it with its tech installed in the venue, which could be better for obviously gaining sponsors and younger crowds. And if you think this is illegal, it's actually not, and it's all in the fine print of your ticket. So there's a disclaimer saying that arenas have the right to use your photo and likeness, and you surrender control of that the minute you walk into the venue. But all the teams that use this say that all the data is anonymized, so you don't have to worry too much about privacy. But I feel like we've been told before, and I don't know if I trust that, but what do you think?
Well, so like, does this turn you off from going to these stadiums?
I don't know. Maybe a little bit.
It wouldn't even faze me. I'm going to be honest.
Maybe, I don't know if it would turn me off, but I would be thinking about that every time I walked in, and maybe it would make me feel uncomfortable if I were there.
I don't know. I just naturally assume that at some point we're all going to be watched constantly.
I mean, we pretty much are now anyways. So
I think it's the reality of the situation. The fact that, hey, we can be like, hey, this is actually happening is cool. I mean, because the reality is no one's going to read the fine print of their sports ticket that they bought on like SeatGeek.
Right.
Like no one's going to do that. So, but, as long as all the data is like anonymized and your personal info is not actually being given, then I don't see a problem with it. I mean, targeted ads are targeted ads. I mean, if they're trying to find better ways to get sponsors for their stadiums, that's on it. Like, I mean, like, what are we going to do? Like, it's not like we can stop it.
There's not much we can do.
So it's like you either stop going to sporting events, but I mean, like, that's the same thing with all the Facebook things that happened. If you don't want to be included in all of it, then move to the woods and have no interaction with anyone ever again, because that's the world we live in now.
Yeah.
So
that's fair. I mean, the one interesting thing that I like about this is, like, every time I've gone to a Blue Jays game, I've noticed that the music has gone from, like, the classic rock from, like, 70s, 80s or whatever to, like, mainstream rock or even, like, hip-hop and that sort of stuff. And I would put money on the fact that they use some sort of technology like this to prove that their fan base is now much younger, and they play music to relate to those people.
I guess
I would put money on that.
You see, what's interesting about that to me, though, is we go to so many tech conferences where like they have where the average age is much older than us.
Yes, that is true.
And like, I remember it was a conference and it was like the chain smokers were there, and I'm like, what? This is the most out of place like band, or like not even a band. They're DJs, right?
I feel like that. Yeah, I feel like that's different though. Like they're trying to be cool and hip and try to get the biggest name. So I went to one and they had Bruno Mars. Yeah. I don't even like Bruno Mars, and I am a 20-something-year-old.
So I mean, I just don't think it's. I think it's just. I mean, hey, maybe the Jays are trying to be hip and young too.
Yeah, but that's probably because they've used tech like this and realized that people want that.
Although I will say this,
same thing at Leafs games. I have noticed a very significant difference from last year and this year in terms of music. It's a lot less AC/DC.
Although I will say this, the Toronto as a city is a fairly young city. There are a lot of young people going to these events. Actually,
that's true. If anyone is out there and you're in a smaller American city or one with an aging demographic, let us know. Have you gone to a game and noticed that the music has gotten younger?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because I don't know if Toronto's the best example, because it is one of the like more young cities in North America.
Yeah, but Canada has an aging population in general, though.
Yeah, but Toronto's like, it's a unicorn of that.
I don't know. We're getting really off topic.
For sure.
Okay, anyways, moving on. Adidas has opened a ridiculously futuristic new facility in Atlanta called the Adidas Speed Factory. They can make and get shoes to market 3 times faster than a traditional factory. It's an entirely automated manufacturing process and designed to produce limited runs of customizable products or replenish the hottest product that might be flying off the shelves. Soon enough, it'll also be able to fill completely customized orders whenever you want to create a shoe online and order it. Adidas has also has a speed factory in Germany, and it's hoping that the two combined will be able to produce 1 million pairs of shoes a year by 2020. In fact, the company is actually hoping to have 50% of its shoes made by speedier, digitized methods going forward.
I mean, I think we're going to see every shoe company do this.
Agreed.
Like, this is what's interesting is we are currently watching shoe manufacturing change for the first time in like the last few decades.
Like maybe even a century almost.
Yeah. So it's point being a while.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be really interesting to see how does this affect pricing. When you look at, basketball shoes, they're not exactly cheap. No. Like if you want to buy the new Kyries or LeBrons or whatever.
You're looking at the PG3s?
I do love those PG3s. I think they're PG2s actually. Oh. But hey, I don't want to spend that money. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see with all of these new methods how the prices go down.
I know, and I feel like if you're not doing something along these lines already, you're already behind.
I would be shocked though if any of these shoe companies weren't already, whether it's opening factories or already have. I mean, like maybe some of them aren't even announcing it. Who knows?
Maybe that's true. Adidas just likes to publicize it. I don't know. Anyways, and then another quick hit here that proves athletes really can sell or market just about anything. Apparently, the number 2 tennis player in the world, Caroline Wozniacki, is using blockchain to maximize her profile and income. So if you're unfamiliar, blockchain is a secure way to store data. Every transaction you make, whether it's sending money somewhere or purchasing something, is stored as a block in a digital chain, and every new transaction is recorded and added as another block to the chain in chronological order. So these blockchains are completely decentralized and transparent to parties involved in the transactions. So Wozniacki is now an ambassador for the health app Limpo, which uses blockchain technology to secure the health data of its users and allow them to purchase rewards. She became the first female athlete to endorse a blockchain product, following the lead of Lionel Messi last year when he endorsed Siren Labs, which is a cell phone that protects users who access their digital currency portfolio on their mobile device.
We talk about this all the time about how athletes are like almost like they're such an amazing tool for marketing.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's like you immediately are like, oh, I like that player. I guess I semi-trust their opinion.
Yeah, or at the very least, be interested enough to look up whatever product they've thrown their support behind.
Or they have enough followers that, just more brand awareness. Mm-hmm. So, it's interesting to see blockchain as well. It was inevitable. That stuff.
It really was. Yeah, but it's cool to see Wozniacki doing it,
I think it's also interesting, too, when it comes to this, is that so far it looks like only Messi and Wozniacki have done it. So those are two European. Well, I guess Messi is Argentinian as well, but he lives in Spain.
Yeah.
So
nice life.
So I think it's interesting to see that it's not North American athletes who are leading the charge on blockchain. So that's interesting.
Although I feel like we've heard of NBA players potentially investing in blockchain as well. They've just been maybe less publicized than this.
Potentially, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. And then our last story of the day, we've talked about a company called SyncThink quite a few times on this show. But for our new listeners, they're a California-based startup that develops concussion tests using eye tracking technology and VR headsets. So it's partnered with a bunch of college programs already, as well as some NBA and NFL teams. And now it's announced it's joining forces with the University of Georgia athletics program to outfit the school's 19 competitive sports programs with their 60-second eye test. The team also confirmed to me in an email that it also worked with the Ottawa Senators last season and is hoping to gain more traction in the hockey world. So we'll keep an eye out for news.
Fun fact, I almost went to UGA.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Would you have been on an athletic team?
Absolutely not.
Well, okay.
Just a fun fact out there.
There you go. Getting to know Alex Radu a little bit better.
But it's cool to see that they're getting in hockey. One could say that the NHL desperately needs more concussion technology partnerships. So it's I'm glad to see that they're working with the Ottawa Senators. And honestly, they should. I can't wait till we get to the point where every week we can be like, hey, this NHL team partnered up with someone else. This NHL team. Oh, Gary Bettman was let go.
It is actually a little... Well, I just delayed response to that. I love it. It's also kind of interesting though that it's the Senators, because they're not notoriously a team that partners with tech companies frequently. It's a really small market. They're in a lot of trouble right now, if anyone's heard about it, with their owner. One
could argue is that no NHL team is known for partnering with tech companies. So
I mean, that's fair. But hey, no, Vegas Golden Knights.
Sure, the Vegas Golden Knights, the less than 1 year old team.
I mean, that's why they're there, aren't they? All right, well, that's it for our ridiculous news segment today. Now we're going to move on to new apps and wearables. Take it away, Alex.
Yep, so big news first. We always seem to be talking about companies and brands leaving the wearables sector, but now we have the opposite. Puma has announced that it will be entering the battle after signing a global license partnership agreement for watches and wearables with Fossil Group. Fossil will oversee the design, development, and distribution of Puma watches and wearables through 2028. Puma isn't the only brand working with Fossil either. Fossil also owns licenses for Michael Kors, Tory Burch, Marc Jacobs, and Karl Lagerfeld for smartwatches and wearables, including its own Fossil brand and its Misfit line. And Puma says that we can start expecting stuff to come out in 2019.
This is really cool. And I mean, on a side note, Fossil watches are absolutely beautiful for the most part. So I think this will look really good.
Also, those are like legit brands as well.
Oh, yeah. Like Michael Kors, are you kidding me? People would kill for those products.
Yeah, I mean, like, though, when you see Michael Kors smartwatches, they are they don't look awesome.
I've actually never seen one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people Google.
Have one?
Yeah, they do. It's an interesting thing, but I mean, it makes sense that they are a fitness brand like Puma is going to go into the wearables market. We talk all the time about how it's growing.
Right.
So why wouldn't they? And just because other companies are failing by not being creative enough doesn't mean that everyone else can. So who knows what they do? I mean, we don't even know what the products are going to be yet.
No. But this I think directly ties in. I was complaining last week about Intel dropping out of the wearables race, and I just thought that was a really stupid idea. We're really just scratching the surface of wearables, and I don't know why you would give up on your department so soon into it,
Yeah.
So I think this is a really good idea from Puma. I mean, all these athletic brands are really starting to take off again after a couple years of maybe staying behind the radar, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. So we'll see what they can do.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye out over the next year to see any announcements. So next up, we have a health and fitness app that has been dubbed the Netflix of fitness, called Fit, and that's a Fit with 2 eyes. The app gives you access to on-demand fitness classes led by fitness experts on your mobile device that can be streamed to a TV at home or just be used on your phone while you are at a gym. The app advertises itself as fitness classes in your pocket and gives you unlimited access to all sorts of high-profile trainers once you subscribe, and you can get live metrics with the Fit band that you strap around your chest. Currently, the app is only officially launched in the UK and Ireland for iOS devices for either a monthly plan of £20, a quarterly plan of £45, and a yearly plan of £120. Although Mandy did search it on iOS in Canada and did see something.
Yeah, it was here, and I could download it.
Yeah, so
I don't know what that means.
So it's probably just maybe a soft launch or something.
Maybe.
So we'll see. The Fitband is included, and if you get you can get a refund if you decide that you don't like it after 10 classes. So I think this is super interesting. It follows the whole. This has been things like Insanity and P90X and stuff like that.
Right.
It's all these things that where you're working out at home because maybe you don't want to go to a gym or whatever. And honestly, 120 pounds, so that's probably almost $200 for a year.
Yeah.
It's much cheaper than the gym.
Yes, I just renewed my gym membership and that sucked.
I pay mine monthly and also don't go, but it is more way more expensive. So it's I think it's a cool taste of what we can see happening with health and fitness apps. Is it's not just going to be free stuff. You are going to be able to get classes, and if you look at the list, these are legitimate high profile UK trainers. So it'd be interesting to see if they do move out to North America and stuff. See what trainers they get here, and just to see how useful it is. But it seems to be fairly priced right now.
Yeah, my first reaction hearing about another health and fitness app is to kind of roll my eyes and just think that there are so many other ones out there. But on the other hand, we are covering things and we are happy when people get better access to healthcare type of products or services, right? So this is just another way to reach more people.
Yeah, and
so all the power to them.
The term Netflix for fitness,
that's a selling point.
Good job to whoever coined that for them, because that's such an easy pitch now. You're
can you copyright that? They should.
I doubt that they can copyright it, but whatever. Cool marketing thing though.
Yeah,
good for them.
Props to them.
All right, so for our last story, Lenovo is targeting the smart wearables market in India, following the Indian Prime Minister's plan to promote the country as an electronics manufacturing hub. Lenovo first started selling its wearables, such as smartwatches and fitness bands, in the country last year, and achieved about 6 to 7% of the market share in the country. By this year, it hopes to increase that number to 20%. So this is just another example of investments in wearables that will see the global wearable market grow. According to the International Data Corporation, India's wearable market was worth $157 million in 2017. Other wearables competing in India come from Xiaomi and Huawei and Fitbit.
Yeah, go Lenovo. Again, we want to see a broader number of companies gaining market share, right? It helps competition. It helps drive prices down for consumers. So, I know this is in India, but hey, small step.
Yeah, just because Apple and Fitbit dominate the market in North America doesn't mean that that's the only wearable market in the world,
or that they're the best products,
or that they're best. Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be interesting to see what Lenovo learns from this and maybe how they adapt it elsewhere in the world.
Right. Okay, well, that's it for our new apps or wearables discussion. Now we're going to move on to concussions.
All right, so every day, a large portion of athletes with a history of repetitive head trauma are battling with a progressive neurodegenerative brain disease called CTE. Symptoms of CTE include blurred vision, dementia, depression, headaches, memory loss, and mood swings. There is no cure, and it only gets worse with time. This is the number one issue in sports, so every week we'll be updating you on what is happening in the world of concussion prevention. So I don't have any big stories today, but I do have 2 smaller reports that I found pretty interesting. So the first one comes from Alberta, and it's the province's first ever report on traumatic brain injuries, or TBIs, and this includes concussions treated in emergency rooms or hospitals. So if you kind of went to like just your doctor's office, it doesn't include those, unfortunately. So it comes from the University of Alberta's Injury Prevention Center, and the big takeaway is that sports-related injuries are not the biggest cause of TBIs in Alberta. So that would be falls of some kind, like slipping, tripping, or just being pushed, or whatever, just falling and hitting your head, and getting a concussion from that. And it's the most common form of concussion in Alberta. This is due to a spike in seniors aged 84 and up. So, hey, like...
Old people, be careful.
Yeah, be careful. Because what's interesting about this report is that they said that hip injuries and stuff like that, which are like the thing you most talk about when you're talking about seniors and injuries, are not the most common. It's actually head injuries. And
I guess when they fall, though, they generally hit their head.
Yeah,
right?
And then they are also more susceptible to brain bleeds and stuff like that. So it's very interesting in that sense, and just kind of awareness. And then the next age group that saw a spike in concussions/TBIs in Alberta is ages 10 to 29, and those are indeed most often due to sports-related incidents.
That definitely makes sense.
So the top 7 causes of TBI/concussions detailed in this report, from most common to least common, are falls, then sports-related injuries, then motor vehicle injuries, then bicycle and off-road vehicle-related injuries, then animal-ridden injuries, which I guess Alberta, and then just other injuries in general, which made up for 50% overall.
Interesting.
So,
well, I feel like that's Alberta's love for animal riding sports, like bull riding and rodeos, and that sort of stuff, like the Calgary
Stampeders.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. So this study linked into another from 2016 that assessed 3,000 concussion patients and found that in 30% of those patients, concussion symptoms lasted longer than 28 days. That's a really big number, and it all goes to show that concussions can come in all shapes and sizes, and we really need to be better at treating them, just because it's really not just athletes. As we talk about every week, everyone can get a concussion, no matter what age you are.
Or your height.
Or anything about you. You can get a concussion, and it's serious. And that kind of ties into the next report, which comes out of Portland, Oregon, and the Portland Tribune, that doesn't have too many new insights that we haven't covered here before, but here's an interesting stat. The report gives an example of how a big high school in Oregon that might have 150 athletes involved in fall sports, between daily practices and competitions, the school could expect at least 1 concussion per month. So this ties into the many times we've talked about how important it is to educate teachers, coaches, and parents about concussions. And, here in Ontario, we saw with Rowan's Law, announced about a month ago now, about how the government is making steps to ensure that people are aware of this injury, because it really does have long-lasting effects.
Especially for youth, too, right? So, yeah, getting teachers, coaches, and parents on board, that's a really big step. And we kind of use this podcast, I guess, a little bit as a PSA. So here is your daily PSA.
Yeah, your weekly PSA on hey, concussions are bad.
Really?
And pay attention.
Be careful.
Exactly. And I mean, like in every single report, I mean, I always read how they're talking about how now concussions are, tied to mental health as well. Like
Absolutely,
things like depression and stuff like that. And, we're still learning more and more about it, and it's going to take years and years to figure out more, and I doubt we'll ever completely figure it out. But, to be aware and to stay aware is super important. So, these stats were interesting to read.
Yeah, the brain is complex. We need to do a lot more research before we figure this out.
Oh yeah, so much more research. All right, but that's it for our concussion discussion this week. So now just for our discussion in general, Mandy had a chance to speak with Dr. Cameron Marshall, the president and co-founder of Complete Concussion Management, or CCM, which is a network of healthcare practitioners that collaborate with doctors to co-manage concussion injuries. So they've introduced a number of tech-enabled products like a concussion tracking app and a concussion database that we've actually talked about on the podcast before. So let's tune in.
Yeah, so Complete Concussion Management started in 2013. I'm the founder of it. And basically it started from me being involved in research. I did a sports medicine fellowship after I graduated from chiropractic college actually here in Toronto. And because I was doing this sports medicine fellowship, we had to do research in an original kind of area, and so I got interested in concussion because it was right around the time of Sidney Crosby's injury, and he was actually, getting some treatment from a chiropractor, and so I was interested in how chiro kind of played into concussion, mostly from a rehab standpoint, and that's kind of where I started, and so I started looking up all the research on concussion, specifically looking at, what's going on inside the brain, what's happening with blood flow, and how come some players are injured only for, a week, and then others are out for, 6 months to a year or even longer. And I just became really fascinated with, the entire kind of what's called pathophysiology. That's like what's going on inside the brain from an injury standpoint, what's actually happening. And that kind of led me into, well, what type of other therapies are available and all these different things. And I found that the evidence that was starting to emerge in kind of the scientific community was that most of the treatment for concussion stems around rehab. So rehab for your visual system, rehab for your balance system, rehab for, treatment of headaches is actually a lot of the headaches come from neck injuries that happen at the same time as a concussion injury might happen. And actually, Sidney Crosby's injury ended up being kind of more of a neck injury in the end. So because I was so involved in all this research, and I was doing actually a project working with the University of Buffalo, they have a well-known, pretty famous post-concussion syndrome rehabilitation clinic and research program, and I was working with them, and because I was immersed in this research and reading all about this and learning all about this, I started looking around for, is anyone kind of doing this? Are there any clinics that are doing this type of thing? And there really wasn't. And so I started a program, my own clinic, and very quickly, because there's nothing else available, people started getting referred from all over Southern Ontario. So people driving 2-3 hours just to come see me because they've been suffering for, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and no one's been able to help them. And just by doing some basic kind of stuff like getting them exercising and, treating their neck and getting them doing some vision exercises and some vestibular balance training, they started getting better very quickly. And so from there, it just kind of grew, and people would always ask, how can I get this, where I live? And then so I kind of had the idea of, let's start training other people to be able to perform this type of rehab, and that way people don't have to travel to come see me. And so from there, we've now grown it to about 200 clinics in Canada. We've just started this year moving into the USA, Australia. But over the evolution of the program, we started realizing that, if we were to see these people earlier and in the acute phase, like right after their concussion, and give them the proper guidance and the proper information, they wouldn't end up, still suffering 6 months to a year later. Maybe we could stop some of this issue. And then so we started getting into more of the acute, on field, in the clinic. First thing, what's the proper way to get somebody back into school and back into sports and all that stuff. And that's when we developed our kind of electronic health, record system that we have. We have a database it's probably one of the largest concussion databases in the world right now. We got, 25,000 people on it or so, I think, right now. But all of our clinics do a lot of the kind of preseason testing for athletes. They also see the athletes immediately after injury. And then we developed a smartphone application that connects directly with our kind of electronic medical record system so that coaches, trainers, those that are on the front lines that, may not know a lot about concussion, we provide them with an online training module. And then once they've completed that training module, they get access to the app. And with that app, they can put, patients on their team list. They can report injuries directly from the sidelines. And then those injury reports go directly into one of our clinics. And then so our clinic gets notified kind of right away. So it started with more of kind of the rehab background, and my background being kind of in the research realm. And it's evolved now into both acute care, sideline management, and then trying to develop the technological tools that go along with, how do we make a better diagnosis quicker? How do we give and empower people on the sidelines to be able to make the right decision, pull an athlete off? And then how do we kind of coordinate that care afterwards so that everybody involved, so from the teachers, the coaches, all other sports that athlete might play, right? Because they might get concussed playing hockey, but they're also on the basketball team and the football team and the rugby team. And so all of those coaches also need to know what happened and what this athlete is allowed to do or not allowed to do. And so that's kind of what the app does, is it connects everybody together. So what started as post-concussion syndrome ended up being a lot of acute, and now we're just kind of getting into all the technological tools that could potentially help.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, because I was going to ask, technology is quite empowering, and I think we've seen it really morph into a tool that can be used at any end of the concussion journey, I guess, whether it's for prevention, diagnosis, or recovery. And I think you touched on it a little bit, but do you want to talk about your experience with technology and how it's helped empower you within your journey of trying to help players and people with concussions?
Yeah, I mean, technology now is so, ubiquitous throughout our society. It's, I'm from the, I grew up without, iPads and basically without the internet, for a lot of it. And now the amount of, capabilities, that there is in the tech world to be able to kind of do things and make us better at what we do and give us more tools in the toolbox, I think is just been incredible. And I think that's really going to be a huge part in all of medicine, not just concussion, but every field of healthcare is benefiting from the amazing technological boom that's kind of happening right now. And it got to the point where, when we started this, we were doing everything like pencil and paper kind of thing and giving trainers, manuals that they could write in and then rip out a sheet and hand it to a player. And that was kind of what they were supposed to do, the first night after the injury. And it was actually our web developers initially that were like, you guys should make a database where you can actually do this electronically. There's so many options now. So we started kind of doing that very primitively. And it got to the point where I was so interested in technology that I was like, I need to learn how to code. And I was like looking at courses for how to do this. And I actually convinced my brother to go into program development. He's actually just finishing his 4th year right now. So, and he does a lot of work for us too. So technology is kind of become a big part of my life, actually.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then, speaking of the database, what kind of information is stored on there and how is it being used? Because, we covered in the show a couple of weeks ago that Australia was launching the first brain bank outside of North America, and they're trying to collect brains, and they eventually want to do research on these for different sorts of brain trauma like CTE. Could your database be used for something like that?
Yeah, I think that is the ultimate goal, because right now what we have in the CTE kind of crisis, when you talk about, the long-term effects of concussion, we don't really know what causes CTE. It's speculated that it's brain trauma, but it could be drug use, it could be genetic, it could be alcoholism, it could be, just extreme physical exertion over a prolonged period of time as an athlete. Like, we really don't know what causes CTE. And so what we have in these brain banks is we have donated brains from, mostly athletes. And so you get what's called a sample bias, where, people of the same type are the ones donating their brains, right? The general public generally doesn't donate their brain. And so you don't get a really good control in that way. Now, what the world has been calling for in the CTE area is we need prospective, meaning data collected before things happen. So data collected now and ongoing. We need prospective data and longitudinal, meaning collected over the period of one's life. And I think that's where our database comes in, because we're starting with basically kids in the kind of teenage, adolescent, young adult lives, and collecting, their balance measures, their vision measures, their memory, their concentration, all these things. And if they do get a concussion, how many concussions have they had previously? So we're documenting all of this, because right now all we have is self-report. So you have somebody who's in their 60s and 70s, and we're trying to ask them how many concussions they had. Well, they can't remember,
Right.
and if you're going to go back and try to find medical records on that, you're going to have to go to probably, 5 or 6 different doctors. You have to go to team doctors. You have to get releases on all this stuff, and it's really hard to track down. And so the idea behind our database is to have one kind of centralized concussion file per patient, so that no matter which one of our clinics they go to, that file is accessed. So even if that patient moves, let's say they're here in Toronto and they end up moving to California, well, if they do get another concussion, they find one of our clinics, they go in, that concussion gets documented. So now we have a running total of the exact number of diagnosed concussions an individual has, what symptoms they had, how long was the recovery, like exactly on days. And the other piece we have is the app that connects with the patient. So now we can know the exact day that a patient's symptoms go away. We can start now studying all sorts of other stuff where we can send them, hey, we want you to fill out this, outcome measure to look at your depression, and then we can start recording depression and things like that through the smartphone application. So the database covers the spectrum, and we're looking mostly to use it right now, mostly as a medical record, so we can see, okay, how many concussions have they had? What was their previous injury like? What was the recovery of that injury like, et cetera? But I think in the future, 20, 30 years, 40 years from now, when these athletes now are, potentially having the issues that the current former athletes are having right now, then I think this database will be very useful to look back on to get an accurate representation of the number of concussions, medical conditions, et cetera, that may give us some more insight.
Absolutely. And what are your thoughts on some of the companies like SyncThink, who they've created some sort of goggles that can detect concussions through ocular movements, or, other technological developments, even like the mouth guards that glow if someone hits you hard, and you could have a potential brain injury. What are your thoughts on those, and do you think that they're effective?
So, the ocular tracking thing, I think has some merit. It's still early in the development phase, I think. I don't think there's enough kind of scientific research yet to know or pinpoint whether or not it's going to be, the be-all, end-all of concussion. But I think that the amount of evidence that is emerging on, ocular motor dysfunction, meaning like how the eyes move, is pretty compelling when you look at concussion, because vision and your ocular motor system is, there's a lot of areas of your brain that are influenced or influence that system. So it's likely to be picked up if there is kind of an injury in that area through the eye. So I think the eyes are an important part of concussion. I think eventually that technology, as more research emerges, I think it just has to prove itself. I think that's kind of what I'm getting at. But we know that ocular motor function is disrupted in a variety of ways, following concussion. So I think tools like this are great. I just think they need a little bit more proving and flushing out before we start kind of, mass promoting it as, a concussion diagnostic tool, because really there hasn't been much research on that. Now, in terms of the mouth guards, and there's also helmet sensors that kind of do the same thing, and kind of what they're looking for is G-forces and how much acceleration to the brain can cause a concussion, and they have these certain thresholds that, if you're over a certain threshold, the light will turn on, or it'll glow, or it'll signal to a smartphone on the sideline kind of thing. Again, the range of concussion is kind of unknown. We have a bit of an idea through helmet sensors in some of the studies done on U.S. college football players. We have a bit of an idea of what the range of concussion is, but that doesn't mean that everyone falls in that range, right? The idea behind, a mouth guard is that there's going to be false positives and there's going to be false negatives. And because, just because I get concussed at, 100 Gs doesn't mean that you can't get concussed at 60 Gs, right? So at what point do we put that threshold? And if we put it at 60 Gs, that light's going to be going off when I'm not concussed, and they're going to be pulling me out of the game. And that's going to make people frustrated and then not want to wear it. But I'm not really as concerned about pulling somebody off that doesn't have a concussion. I think, better be safe than sorry. I'm concerned the other way. If you set the threshold, let's say at 70 Gs, but you have somebody that's a little bit more susceptible and they do get a concussion at 60 Gs, well, that player's going to come off complaining of symptoms and signs of concussion, and the coach may look at the app or look at the mouth guard and say, "Oh, your light didn't go off. You're fine. Get back out there." Right. So I think that again, still early, but the concept I think is eventually going to be valid. I think what we need to do is go through a period of studying, and we're actually talking with a mouthguard company right now, but I think the value is if they were to, let's say, test these mouthguards, put them on people, set a range, I think ultimately what you're going to find is if you can kind of use machine learning and track the number of impacts and the magnitude of impacts that are occurring for an individual, right? Let's say, so like our database, we have a file on an individual. They have a smartphone application on the sideline for the coach and trainer. Let's put their mouthguard data in there as well. So now we know what their preseason metrics are. We know what their balance, reaction time, memory, concentration, visual tracking speed, neurocognitive scores, everything. We have this full picture of kind of how they function. Now they go out and play, and now we're collecting the number of hits they're getting. We're collecting the magnitude of each of those impacts. Now, if that person comes off complaining of symptoms of a concussion, well, now we can look back and see what the magnitude of that particular hit was at the time, and then we can confirm the diagnosis by having them come into clinic, either retesting them if we needed to or whatever. Mm-hmm. But now we know kind of, okay, that person just got a concussion at 63 Gs. So maybe now what the machine learning has to do is tailor when that light comes on to that particular patient, you know what I mean, or that particular athlete. So I think once you get into these complex algorithms and start building up technology even further, I think they'll be really valuable. I think that right now there's not enough, evidence, and I think we're still too early to be, again, mass market selling them.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point about the AI. And I guess my last question, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and look at some of the professional leagues. And I don't know how much you can speak to them, but I mean, the concussions have been a really big issue in football, but also in hockey. And we haven't really seen the NHL even admit that there's a link between hockey and concussions. And from what we've heard, there hasn't really been any adoption of concussion prevention technology or using the technology to, help treatment or anything. They still have the concussion spotters in the stands, but we haven't seen much else. And then we hear from the NBA that they've adopted ThinkThink's technology with the eye goggles. So what can leagues do to kind of improve and use technology in that way?
Again, I'm not really involved in the professional sports realm. We mostly deal with amateur, but I think that a lot of the stuff, and even let's say the NBA is adopting the technology, I wouldn't necessarily go right in and say they're adopting it. They're probably testing it. They're probably looking at it, and I think that's what a lot of the leagues are kind of in that phase right now is just kind of seeing what's out there, testing it out, seeing how it works and things like that. I know that there's a few ongoing studies right now at the NHL level looking at various testing tools and things that are available. I know just from researchers that I know that are involved with some of those studies, and so various leagues are looking at various things. I mean, if you look at what the NFL protocol is, it's still, they have the concussion spotters in the stands. There's no real sophisticated technological testing that's done on the sidelines, like that. Like, how they have the kind of tent that's on the sideline now at the NFL games.
Yeah.
So there, you wonder what's going on in the tent. Well, they just published what their protocol was a couple weeks ago, and so it's really, they're just doing a clinical interview with somebody who's in there, and they're reviewing the game footage of the impact that happened to try and see, okay, does this person require further testing? And so they're looking for symptoms, right? So if the player's reporting symptoms, then they'll take him from the tent, remove him from the game, bring him back into the back room. If the player doesn't have any symptoms and it's telling them that they're okay, they'll do basically like a basic neurological exam and a neck exam to make sure there's nothing there, and some really basic, clinical testing. Nothing really like technologically advanced or anything like that at this point. So I think that, again, when you get into that level and you get into that liability, I think that the technology still has to prove itself out. So I think a lot of the leagues can, start testing it, start looking at it, but I think that, full out adoption or implementation of it will take probably just a few more years to flush out through the research.
Great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me. I really appreciate this.
All right, well, that's it for today's episode. Thanks to everyone who listened. We really appreciate it. Just a reminder that we're also now in a daily format if you'd rather listen to us that way. You can also follow us on Twitter. We're at ITB Tech and Sports, or on our personal accounts at Mandy V. Kovacs and Alex T. Radu. This was episode 41. It's incredible. Thanks to everyone who's listened to us.